You've probably heard the official story of Air India Flight 182. It's a story of terrible loss, a horrific tragedy. But what if that story isn't the whole truth? According to the actual intelligence agents who worked on the case, the public was told one thing while they believed something else entirely. Drawing on some newly analyzed source materials, we're talking leaked documents, whistleblower testimony, we're going to piece together the secret history of Canada's deadliest terror attack. The date is June 23rd, 1985. A bomb goes off on Air India Flight 182 as it's flying over the Atlantic. Just like that, 329 people gone. I mean, think about that. To this day, it is still the deadliest terrorist attack in Canadian history. And for a long time, until 9/11, it was the deadliest act of aviation terrorism the world had ever seen. The official story that came out, it blamed Sikh separatists. But what if that wasn't the whole story? Not even close. According to the people who were actually investigating it, agents from Canada's own intelligence service, that official narrative was, well, a carefully constructed lie. A lie designed to cover up something much, much more disturbing. All right, so let's get into it. The first big red flags, the first clues that something was seriously off here, they all pop up at the airport on the day of the bombing. And look, we're not talking about one little mistake. This was a whole chain of really, really suspicious failures. Okay, just look at this cascade of, let's call them failures. First, right before the bag with the bomb in it is supposed to be scanned, the X-ray machine just mysteriously breaks. 15 minutes before. How convenient, right? Then you have this special security officer who is literally flown in for just that one day for that one flight. He gives the staff a totally misleading demo of a handheld sniffer. He tells them, hey, don't listen for the beeps, listen for a loud whistling noise, a noise the device almost never makes. And to top it all off, he skips calling for backup sniffer dogs who were only 45 minutes away. You start to add this all up, and these don't feel like random mistakes, do they? They feel intentional. And if that wasn't suspicious enough, get this. A whole bunch of passengers, all of them connected to the Indian government, canceled their tickets right at the last minute. And we're not talking about just anyone. This is the Indian Consul General and his family, the head of North America Affairs for India, even a guy who would go on to become a premier in Canada, Ujjal Dosanjh, with his family. Is that just a wild coincidence? Or did all these officials know something that the other 329 people on that plane didn't? Now, the thing is, the investigators on the ground, they saw all this weird stuff too. It wasn't lost on them. And it led them to develop a completely different theory of the crime, a secret theory, one that was going to be buried for decades. And this quote, wow, this is from an agent with CSIS, that's Canada's spy agency. He's in an internal meeting, and he basically says, look, if you want to solve this thing fast, just send some vans down to the Indian High Commission. And then he says it plain as day. We know it, and they know it. They are involved. Just think about that. This wasn't some wild conspiracy theory from the outside. This was the belief inside Canada's own intelligence service. And it went way beyond just a hunch. The CSIS agents were so convinced that they actually mapped out their own theory of the crime, a theory that eventually got leaked to a couple of journalists. And in their version of events, this wasn't just a few Sikh separatists acting alone. No, this was a top-down, state-sponsored operation. They even had what they called a criminal flowchart to explain it. It's pretty straightforward. At the very top, the mastermind, the government of India itself, working through its intelligence agencies. Step 2, the handlers, Indian agents of influence, provocateurs, operating right here in Canada. And then, at the bottom of the pyramid, you have the foot soldiers, supporters of a Sikh separatist group called Babar Khalsa. The investigators believe these guys were essentially being used as pawns, maybe not even knowing who was really pulling the strings. So the big question is, if Canada's own spies believe this, why did we never hear about it? Why wasn't this the official story? Well, this leaked memo from an RCMP task force head pretty much spells it out. He wrote that investigating the Indian government's role was an area that our government will not wish to get into. Why? Because it might severely impact relations with India. It was a political calculation. It seems justice took a backseat to diplomacy. So years pass, the main suspects, they're finally charged, but they're acquitted in 2005. A lot of people blamed a totally bungled prosecution. The public was outraged, I mean truly outraged, and it forced the government to finally do something. But the solution they came up with, well, it had its own secrets too. So in 2006, the Canadian government launches a big public inquiry, the John Major Inquiry. And for the families of the 329 victims, this felt like it could be it. This was a moment of real hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally going to get the whole, unvarnished truth. But that hope didn't last long. The inquiry started turning away key witnesses, specifically the ones who could talk about India's involvement. Those CSIS whistleblowers? Nope, not allowed to testify. The journalists who wrote the book Soft Target, detailing the agent's theory, the inquiry didn't want to hear from them. They even turned away an Indian police officer who secretly flew to Canada offering to give evidence. It's just unbelievable. And here is the reason why. This is the absolute smoking gun. It's a direct quote from the inquiry's own official terms of reference, its own rulebook. And it says, flat out, that the inquiry is forbidden from looking into who was responsible for the bombing, or the role, if any, of the government of India. Can you believe that? The whole thing was designed from the very beginning not to find the answer to the biggest question of all. So, you might be thinking, okay, this was a long time ago, a nearly 40-year-old cover-up. Why does it still matter so much today? Well, according to the sources we're looking at, the failure to get justice for Flight 182 has had some pretty devastating consequences that echo right into the here and now. Just take a look at this timeline. 1985, you have the bombing. 2006, that very limited inquiry. Now let's jump forward to 2023. A man, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, is assassinated on Canadian soil in British Columbia. So what's the connection? Well, Nijjar was one of the leading voices calling for a new, unrestricted public inquiry into the Air India bombing. And just a few months after his death, Canada's Prime Minister stands up and publicly accuses the Indian government of being involved in his murder. So the argument that the source material lays out is pretty chilling. It's that by choosing to look the other way, by not holding India accountable back in 1985, Canada basically sent a message that a foreign government could interfere on Canadian soil, could even commit murder, and not face any real consequences. And that, the argument goes, emboldened a campaign of what we now call transnational repression that's still happening today. But this story isn't over. The push for the truth continues. Right now, there's a petition launched by a Canadian member of Parliament that's gathering signatures. And what's it demanding? Exactly what the John Major inquiry was forbidding from doing. A brand new, totally unrestricted public inquiry that's free to follow the evidence no matter where it leads. And so that leaves us with the one big lingering question. After all this time, for the sake of the 329 victims and their families, for Canada's own sovereignty, and for the very idea of truth, nearly 40 years later, will the full story of Air India Flight 182 ever really be told?